What if the only thing standing between your people and total annihilation was you? A young woman with no army, no political power, and no guarantee that the most powerful king in the world would even listen. This is not fiction. This is the true story of Esther, a Jewish orphan girl who rose from nothing to become queen of the Persian Empire, and then risked her life to stop a genocide. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more chilling stories. History has never seen a woman quite like her. The world Esther was born into, to understand Esther, you need to understand her world. Around the 5th century BC, the Persian Empire under King Ahasuerus, also known as Xerxes I, was the most powerful empire on earth. It stretched from India to Ethiopia, covering 127 provinces. Within it lived a scattered, exiled people, the Jews, absorbed into Persian society, keeping their faith quietly and their heads down. One of them was a man named Mordecai, who lived in Susa, the royal capital. In his care was his younger cousin Hadassah, an orphan. Both her parents had died. Mordecai raised her as his own daughter, giving her a Persian name so she could survive in a world not always kind to outsiders. That name was Esther. From orphan to queen, Esther grew into a remarkable young woman, not just in beauty, but in grace, wisdom, and a quiet inner strength. Then, one dramatic event changed everything. King Ahasuerus summoned his queen, Vashti. During a royal banquet, she refused. His advisors warned her defiance would spread across the empire, so she was removed and banished. Now the throne needed a new queen. Women were gathered from every province. Esther was among them. Mordecai told her to keep her Jewish identity secret. No one would know where she truly came from. Inside the palace, she captivated everyone she met. When she stood before the king, Ahasuerus chose her. The Jewish orphan from Susa became queen of the Persian Empire. The enemy appears, but peace inside the palace was fragile. A man named Haman was elevated above all other nobles, and the king commanded everyone to bow before him. Everyone obeyed, except Mordecai. He told them plainly he was a Jew. When Haman discovered this, individual revenge was too small for him. He plotted to destroy every single Jew in the entire empire. He cast lots, called Purim, to choose the best day, then went to the king with a poisonous pitch. There was a dangerous group of people who followed their own laws and threatened the realm. See, he offered to fund their destruction himself. The king handed Haman his signet ring. Decrees were sent across all 127 provinces. On a set date, every Jew, man, woman, and child would be killed. Communities fell into mourning. Mordecai tore his clothes and wept in the streets. The Jews had no army. They had no power. What they had was one woman inside the palace walls. The moment of decision. When Esther heard of Mordecai's grief, she sent to learn what was wrong. He sent back the full story and one urgent message. Go before the king. Plead for your people. Esther replied with one critical problem. Approaching the king without being summoned was punishable by death, even for the queen. And the king had not called for her in 30 days. Mordecai's answer was direct. He told her not to think she would escape just because she lived in the palace. Then, he asked the question that echoes through history. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther made her choice. She asked Mordecai to gather the Jews in Susa and fast for 3 days. She would do the same. Then she would go to the king. And if she perished, she perished. Courage in the throne room. On the 3rd day, Esther dressed in her royal robes and stood in the inner court. The king looked up and saw her, and extended his golden scepter. She was safe, but rather than blurt out her request, she showed remarkable strategic wisdom. She simply invited the king and Haman to a banquet. When the king asked what she truly wanted, she invited them to a second banquet the next day. Patience, not impulse. Haman left the first banquet furious that Mordecai still refused to bow, and ordered a towering gallows built to hang him. That same night, the king could not sleep. His servants read him the royal records. and reached the account of how Mordecai had once saved the king from an assassination plot. The king realized nothing had been done to honor him. The next morning, Haman arrived intending to request Mordecai's execution. Instead, the king asked him what should be done for a man the king wished to honor. Haman, assuming the king meant himself, described the grandest ceremony imaginable. The king told him to do exactly that. For Mordecai the Jew, Haman was forced to publicly honor the man he wanted dead. The unmasking at the second banquet, the king asked Esther once more what she wanted. This time she spoke. She begged for her life and the lives of her people who had been condemned to destruction. The king demanded to know who was responsible. Esther pointed directly at Haman, this wicked man. The king stormed out in fury. Haman fell at Esther's feet begging for mercy. When the king returned and saw it, he condemned Haman on the spot. Haman was hanged on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai. Persian law, however, could not simply cancel a royal decree. So Esther went before the king once more, weeping, asking him to undo the disaster. The king allowed her and Mordecai to issue a new decree in his name, giving the Jews the right to defend themselves throughout the empire. The day Haman had chosen for their massacre became a day of victory instead. What Esther teaches us: the Jews celebrated their survival, and the festival of Purim was born. Still observed by Jewish communities worldwide today, thousands of years later. But Esther's story is more than ancient history. It is a timeless lesson in courage. Esther was afraid. She admitted it. She fasted 3 days before she could bring herself to act. And then she walked forward anyway, knowing it might cost her life. She did not rush. She was wise, patient, and precise, qualities as powerful as any weapon. She teaches us that ordinary people placed in extraordinary positions must decide what they will do with the influence they have been given. An orphan with no parents, no army, and no political allies became the person who saved an entire people. Not because she was fearless, because she chose action over silence. This is Esther, not a soldier, not a general, not a politician. A young woman who refused to stay quiet when her silence meant death for thousands. A warrior of a different kind. History remembers kings and conquerors, but it also remembers Esther because she stood up when everything was on the line and chose her people over her own safety for such a time as this. If this gave you chills, subscribe for more stories like this.